We have Stan the Jet fan here today to talk about Aaron Rodgers' first game as a New York Jet. He said he was crying during the game. Find out if those were tears of joy or sorrow up next on No Buts About It. All right, Stan, welcome back to the show. Great to have you. You have waited for this for over a year. Aaron Rodgers has actually played a full game as a New York Jet. So, just off the bat, what were your initial reactions to actually getting to see that after all the hype last offseason? And then, him running out with the American flag, that super cool intro, 4 snaps, he's out for the season. You got to wait again. But you finally got to see it. What were your initial thoughts?
I mean, it was a bit of a mixed bag of thoughts on what happened there, but for the most part, I'm very happy. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was able to audible and read the defense as well as he was before, and that was one of my bigger concerns. That 2 years or a year and a half of not playing would have put a lot of rust on him, but he actually looked really good. Our O line also did a really good job in the first half of that game. And there's only this, I don't think he got a single pressure on him till the second. So we did a really good job on that as well. I like what we saw in offense in that game. There were still a few little issues, but I think they're small enough and they're easy enough that we'll be able to fix them the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so Aaron Rodgers threw for 167 yards. He was 13 for 21. That's a 61.9 completion percentage, one touchdown and one interception. However, if I'm remembering correctly, that interception was a tipped ball, correct? It wasn't
Yeah,
necessarily his fault.
I think it hit Garrett Wilson first, and then that defender pushed it out. It went up into the air, and a different defender grabbed it. So I do not believe that interception was on Rodgers. I think the only thing perhaps was if he had an extra second. So there's a lot of pressure on him. That was one of the first pressures he had, actually. And he threw the ball into a very tight window. Garrett Wilson was not able to grab it. I don't think it was Wilson's fault or Rodgers' fault. I think it was just a good job by the defense there.
I do want to talk about Garrett Wilson here in a minute, but something I was paying attention to, and you've already kind of alluded to this twice now, is both the offensive line and then those adjustments. I thought the Jets did a really good job of getting set up early so that Aaron Rodgers had time to kind of read the defense and audible out of plays. And it looked like he was kind of quite a few times completely changing the play, moving guys around where he wanted them. Um, you mentioned in our text messages with each other that you were happy that he was kind of fixing Nathaniel Hackett's mistakes. Can you go into what that relationship kind of looks like for you going here on out?
Yeah, I think my perception of the Rodgers Hackett relationship is that Rodgers likes working with someone who doesn't put too much on him, and Hackett, he's not very good with calling plays. We saw that, yeah, while that Monday night game as well. And for example, last year, if you remember this, my biggest issue with Hackett is that he's too predictable, and he always calls 2 run plays followed by a pass play. And unfortunately, we still saw that in this Monday night game. But there were quite a few times where you saw Rodgers call an audible, completely change the play. And for me, I was getting worried because I saw the clock ticking down till there was only 1 or 2 seconds left before that play clock would expire. But Rodgers making changes to the play, and almost every time it ended up being a wide open receiver. One time it was Garrett Wilson wide open, having enough space to even move another 6 yards down the field. And that's the type of stuff I really wanted to see from Aaron Rodgers. However, I think Hackett's play calling is still having a drastic negative impact on the team. Again, that 2 runs followed by a pass went on through basically the entire first half, and the only time he strayed away from that was the second half when we were trailing, and when it was we had to pass basically every play. I think we need to find some sort of balance there between a pass and rush offense, especially after a game like that game where we were basically running gap plays with Breece Hall the entire time, and he was not finding the gaps. And I don't think that was Breece Hall's fault. I think it was the fact that you're going up against Fred Warner, the best linebacker, in my opinion, in the game today, and someone who knows how to read the field very well. So what was happening is Breece Hall was getting into the middle of the field, trying to split the tackles on all of these plays, and was unable to do so because it was a very tough defense. Rather than putting him in some zone reads or some outside runs that I think would have worked really well, or even getting someone like Braylon Allen involved more in the run game, which I think would have also been a positive. There was a sense of stubbornness on Hackett's play calling that I think hurt the Jets in the end.
Yeah, the run game. I mean, Breece Hall had a good game, but you mentioned Braylon Allen there, and he came in near the end of the game, and we did see some good runs from him for a rookie. He's a very young rookie. I don't even think he'll be 21 by the end of this NFL season. So that's a promising aspect of the Jets offense. But Garrett Wilson, he looked good. There was that one drive where him and Rodgers were just carving it up. He had 6 receptions on 11 targets for 60 yards. Didn't quite have a touchdown, but he was getting lined up in quite a few places. He took 12 slot snaps, and then he took 37 snaps out wide. So whether it was Nathaniel Hackett or Aaron Rodgers, they were moving Garrett Wilson around, making the defenses adjust to him. And then, of course, Allen Lazard also kind of got going a little bit compared to what we saw from him last year. That Aaron Rodgers chemistry probably helped out. That one drive that I think you know what drive I'm talking about. I can't remember if it was the second, third quarter where they were just Aaron Rodgers was just out there slinging. It looked like regular Aaron Rodgers. Do you think we can see more of that coming?
Well, I mean, first I want to backtrack a little bit. I do think Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson had off games. I think they performed well in moments, but especially Breece Hall, he really struggled to get going. I think he actually even either he or Garrett even apologized to the fans after the game and said like both of them did not perform very well. I think the issue was though that we were not doing a great job of giving the ball to other players to take pressure off Wilson and Hall. It was basically just Wilson and Hall, and Lazard would get 1 or 2 touches. So I think that was a big issue. And sorry, can you come back to that question again?
Yeah, so we saw, and that's interesting to me that you now say Garrett Wilson had an off game because I thought he looked great. Personally, watching him,
Well, I think he looked great, but I don't think he was doing enough with yards after carry. And again, that's where I think it was a play calling issue where either Hackett's offense or perhaps Wilson was just having not the best day. Were unable to provide him spots to get through. And like I think his best play was probably that one where Rodgers audibled out of Hackett's play. So that's why I do think a lot of the issues are Hackett's play calling.
Okay, and then my question, and this will actually give me an opportunity to word it a bit better. Last season, I mean, you had Zach Wilson, you had Tim Boyle, you had all kinds of quarterbacks. So the Jets' offense was primarily a run offense with Breece Hall. However, we did see, and again, I can't remember if it was the second or the third quarter, but that there was this one drive that was just magical. I mean, I believe it ended in a touchdown, but even for me, just watching, it was beautiful. I was like, this is what the Aaron Rodgers Jets are supposed to look like. And he was just passing the ball outside the numbers, middle coverages. He was getting everyone involved. I think Tyler Conklin had a catch on that drive. I just like it was great. It was what the Jets were supposed to be. And we saw a brief preview of that. So do you expect the Jets to now be more of a passing offense than a run on offense?
I'd definitely love to see that, but I think the best bet for the Jets, especially these next. So the Jets' first 3 games are all happening within 10 days, right? So it's a really tight schedule. So I think I would rather see a more run-heavy offense, especially if we're using Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, and Izzy Banakanda, because it would take a lot of the load off the rest of the team who have to worry about, 3 games in 10 days, which is very tough, especially in a sport like football, where you're hitting each other every single play, right? So I think for now, I would prefer more of a run heavy offense. But after that, once we get more into a normal schedule, I would like more of that more of a passing game. And I think one thing that would make a big impact there would be Mike Williams coming back in full health. I think he had barely any snaps on the field, and I don't think he had. I cannot remember a single target or reception. Can you correct me on that if I'm wrong? Or
I don't think he did have any receptions.
and I don't think the ball was even thrown his way. So I think that snap count was more of just letting him get out there, feel the game a bit. But I hope he gets 1 or 2 targets at least the next game, and maybe by week 3, he could have a normal workload, which I think for him, as a 50-50 ball specialist against the Patriots, that's going to be a big. He will be a big impact player in week 3.
Okay. Switching to the other side of the ball, let's talk about this Jets defense. Now, the 49ers, whenever you play the 49ers, you have to game plan for the run because you have Christian McCaffrey. That's expected. However, Christian McCaffrey didn't play in this game. We found out about an hour before the game that Christian McCaffrey wasn't going to play in this game. And Jordan Mason, who's been in the league for 3 years now, he got his first NFL start against the New York Jets. He had 28 carries for 147 yards and a touchdown. And a lot of those carries were right up the middle, just running straight through between the guard and the center. Do you got concerns? Because, I mean, if that happens with Christian McCaffrey, it's like, okay, it's Christian McCaffrey. Do you have concerns, though, that Jordan Mason put on that kind of performance against that defensive line?
Yeah, that is a concern of mine. I think that can be remedied with a few things. For one, we had a lot of injuries that impacted our ability to deal with run plays. One was Michael Carter II. He is so important in that run game. I think he was probably the 3rd biggest player in the run game, and in terms of a positive last season. And then we also had CJ Mosley go down, and CJ Mosley, he's our kind of discount Fred Warner, but not not to say he's not great, but he's a great athlete. He's a guy who, he's a guy who's talking with the coaches while those plays, and I think having someone like that out for the amount of game that he was out does make an impact there. So I think a healthy Jets team does a much better job of that. We also did not have Leaky Fotu, who was brought in only really as a run stop defensive tackle. So that was the reason we brought him in this offseason. I think he was our second signing of the offseason. So that was the one thing we needed him to do, and unfortunately we just didn't have him this game. I think moving into the next games, one big question mark will be, will Hassan Reddick get his extension or whatever needs to be done to get him on the field? That definitely makes a big impact. And while he's maybe not a directly run first type player, I think just having someone like that to put more pressure on the backfield is gonna help us a lot.
I'm glad you brought up Hassan Reddick because we've talked about him on the channel before. You've shared your opinions with like Joe Douglas's job maybe on the line here with this deal. Now Hassan Reddick, he's sticking to his guns. He's skipping a game now. He has skipped Monday Night Football, a primetime game. So what has your opinion changed at all around Hassan Reddick since then?
I mean, I still think we should sign him. I still think it's very important. I think he is being unreasonable with his like what he wants, and I do think a lot of it is on Joe Douglas. I mean, to start off, Joe Douglas offered Reddick a extension before the Jets even finalized the trade, right? And Reddick said no to that. And I think Douglas should have stepped back and said he's saying no to the extension we're offering him, which who knows what that number was, but I would guess it's at least an increase of 3-4 million. He said no to that. I think Douglas should have realized at that point it was not going to work out. The other thing to consider is that Reddick was offered big contracts by plenty of other teams that were looking at trading him, with the Eagles that offer him a contract extension as well. So the fact that every team in the NFL basically that looked at him was not able to get something done, I think that should have been a pretty big clue to Joe Douglas that he was not going to be someone that was going to be we were going to be able to work with. Now that being said, you did what you did. You traded for him. You lost the third round pick in 2 years, whatever that is. You have to do something now. And I think the best thing to do would be to guarantee as much of his contract, which is what I said. I think whatever 2-3 weeks ago, last time we talked about this. But you have to get him on the field, and I don't think Reddick would have made the difference in this Monday Night Football game. I don't think him being there would have led to a Jets win. But I think when it comes down to the playoffs, and when you're looking at those mid-seed AFC teams, I think Reddick will be a difference maker then. I think also in our division, you saw the Dolphins, you saw the Bills, you saw the Patriots, their games. Reddick will be a difference maker in those 6 divisional games, and we're going to need him for that.
All right. So, final question about Monday Night Football. Robert Saleh had an interesting statement after the game. He said, "We are better off now at 0-1 than we were last year at 1-0 when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. I think Zach Wilson came in, had an insane game, one of his random games where it's like where you it was kind of like, oh, maybe Zach Wilson is the guy, and then the next week he just kind of fell off, and that's the story of Zach Wilson. But do you agree with Robert Saleh's comments? I saw some Jets fans were like mad that he said that like no, we lost, like we are not better off than what a loss is always better than or is always worse than a win. But I think I kind of get what he was saying, but I want to know your thoughts.
I 100% agree with him, and as you know, I've been pretty harsh on him the last year. I've even considered him as like not a good head coach. But that being said, regardless of his play call, regardless of the other stuff, he is correct there, right? If you just look at his statement, I think the Jets fans who are upset at that were either A, being unreasonable and expecting us with a injured team not having our biggest offseason or one of our biggest offseason acquisitions, to beat the team in the league that has the most complete roster. And in my opinion, the best roster. I don't think they're the best team, but I think they definitely have the best roster in the NFL. So to beat a team like that would be a very unreasonable task on week one with Rodgers not playing in 1.5 years and all these other things to look at, right? So I think that's one big issue with it. I think a lot of fans of the Jets as well are also upset at Robert Saleh even before the game. So it's just like, oh, we hate this guy. We don't like this guy. Now look what he said, So I don't think people being upset at Saleh was reasonable. I think Saleh is correct for that. And at the end of the day, our O-line is way better in this one performance, this one game that was a loss than any game, honestly, in the last 2 seasons. And I know you've watched a lot of Jets the last 2 seasons, maybe even before that. Like I cannot think of a time, except unless you go back to the Brickshaw Ferguson and Nick Mangold era, when the Jets had this good of an O-line. And I was watching it, and like I don't even remember what the stat was, but like Rodgers spent a crazy amount of time against one of the best pass rushers in the league without getting pressured, right? This is such a big monumental push in the right direction, that to me, that like I was happy with just that. Now moving forward, you have a quarterback who knows how to play, knows how to audible. I think the only thing that needs to be done there to make this work with that quarterback situation is for Rodgers to be able to figure out a balance with Hackett where he's not having to actively in-game make all these changes. I think Hackett needs to be a little more progressive with the ball and passing a little bit earlier. But ultimately, yeah, we're 100% in a better position than we've been in anytime last season, anytime the last probably since 2015.
Okay. I agree. I agree because I think first of all, last season you were in a situation where it was Zach Wilson was your quarterback at the end of your week 1 game. And now Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback at the end of your week 1 game. That already is a huge jump. And then you've got Garrett Wilson showing promise. And Garrett Wilson has already had 1,000-yard seasons with Zach Wilson, again, Tim Boyle, like a slew of random quarterbacks throwing to him. Breece Hall has had time to get into the league and show that he can be a 1,000-yard runner. And a lot of your young guys, it sucked. It was hard to watch, but that those bad years gave them time to develop. And now you guys have a roster of underrated stars, in my opinion. I mean, a lot of people don't talk about Garrett Wilson. I mean, Brees Hall gets some flowers, but probably not as much as he would. So I definitely understand where Robert Saleh was coming from. I appreciate your thoughts on that. And Jets fans, we will continue to follow the New York Jets throughout the season. This Aaron Rodgers kind of story that is going on. So make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Stan the Jet Fan is on the channel all the time to tell us his thoughts about the New York Jets. And we appreciate you stopping by. Until next time, go do something nice for someone.